Come join me on January 27th at 7 p.m. Central, where Joelle and I are going to be live and examining the feasibility of their retirement plan and poking around for risks and opportunities. This is your chance to see the analysis and also ask questions. You can register at livewithroger.com. Do you want to have the confidence to not just survive retirement, but rock retirement? Well, we're going to help you build that on the Retirement Answer Man Show. Welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. It is the last week of January and the last installment of our Retirement Plan Live case study with Joelle and Mike. Today, she and I are going to talk about how to build community and purpose in a new area because they just moved from one state to another. And this is important whether you move or not. And then tomorrow night on the 27th, by the way, we have the live results meetup webinar where Joelle will be live with me and you going through the feasibility of their retirement plan and noodling on what risks or opportunities they should focus on to improve their plan. So you can sign up for that at livewithroger.com. And if you can't make it tomorrow night, go ahead and sign up anyway, because we'll send out the replay so you can watch it at your leisure. A couple quick announcements. Now, next month, starting next week, we are going to spend a month doing two things. Number one, talking about inflation and retirement and thinking through how to manage this risk in an organized way so you can take some action there. And then secondly, we're going to be answering a lot of your listener questions because we need to do that as much as normal this month because we've had so much going on. So that's what we're going to start next month. Now, as part of the culmination of this case study, we are opening up the Rock Retirement Club for open enrollment. We only open it 3 times a year now. And the reason we do that is we want to bring in new members into the club in groups. And the point of that is, one, we want to help everybody have a quick start on taking advantage of the masterclass so you can start building your plan of record. And doing that in a group fashion will help give some more support there. Second, we want to make sure everybody gets the value of the membership of the Rock Retirement Club because we have the private podcast, we have the community where you can chat, we have meetups, we have the masterclass and the tools that are included, like new retirement planning calculator. So we want to help everybody make the most of that. And lastly, by bringing in people in groups, it will help everybody make some connections if they desire. So if you're interested in joining the Rock Retirement Club, we're going to be opening that up, I believe, tomorrow. And the open membership will be available for about 10 days. And then we're going to close it to new members. And then we'll start walking a little bit of life with the new members in the club and get them integrated. So you can check that out at rockretirementclub.com. With that, let's go and talk with Joelle about building community in a whole new neighborhood. Joelle, the hard part's over. Well, maybe not. You outlined your goals and we've outlined the finances and you told your story. Now we're going to talk a little bit more of the non-financial stuff. I don't know if that's harder or easier.
I know. You'd think it would be easier, but I've come to find that it is just as important as the financial side. And I think a lot of people don't spend adequate time thinking about this part. Who are you going to be in retirement?
I think it's harder because it doesn't add up in a spreadsheet. There's an elegance to a spreadsheet and dealing with numbers as you can, quote unquote, control them. We had a gentleman on a few weeks ago during, I think it was the second or third week of this, Michael Steiner Bunjay, MBS he goes by because it's always hard to pronounce his name. And it's a good conversation. I suggest you listen to it. But he had an interesting thought about this phase of life. He has a new book coming out called How to Begin. And when you retire, you're very comfortable and familiar with doing a lot of things. You're a very capable person. It's obvious, Joelle, that you are a very capable lady. And it's easy to continue to do things you're familiar and comfortable with. And now you're faced with, what can I do? You have all these possibilities now that you're not working, right? Especially after June, when the health goes away, you're faced with day after day for year after year, for decade after decade, having total control over what you do. And that's called the tyranny of choice, right? You have too many choices. And he made the statement I thought was really profound, which is, it's not as interesting of what can you do. The question is, what will you do? And so why don't we start there? What will you do day after day, year after year?
Well, I have put some thought into this because it is so huge, especially because I feel I've retired a little bit younger, maybe than some people. I've got a lot of years, hopefully, ahead of me. So the one thing that I've kind of taken to heart that I know that you do is maybe you do New Year's resolutions, I don't know, but I know that you are a fan of a word of the year.
Yes.
And so I have thought about that in preparation for my retirement. And so my kind of word for retirement was expand. I feel that as I age, I've lived a little bit more of a constrained, feared life. I get old. I don't want to take risks. I don't want to do this. Oh, no, that's too hard. So I'm trying to expand and doing some new things in retirement. So I came up with a list before we retired, before we moved here. And they were things like, I wanted to take a yoga class on a weekly basis. I hadn't done yoga in 25 years. And I thought, am I going to put my old body back on the floor and do this? But I did. And I do it consistently every week, which has brought me into a network of women and men that I see on a regular basis. And that's been really nice. I also decided to take a Pilates class on a weekly basis, which I had never done in my life. It has been wonderful just getting that strength and again, connecting with the same students on a weekly basis. And so that's been a nice social connection. A third thing that I wanted to do was get involved in a hiking group. And through my Pilates class, I connected with women that were hiking. And so in the summers, I've joined them right away when I first moved here on some hikes, which has been wonderful. And then I decided that I wanted to find a church for social connection, which I've not done yet. COVID has kind of really constrained that social piece. And so I've just kind of put that on the back burner until later. And then I found a nonprofit organization that I wanted to volunteer for. And so I met with them 2 weeks ago, and they actually, which I didn't share with you before, but they actually hired me. So I am working for them, but it's very, very minimal. I literally do not count that as human capital at all. But I now have a connection with an organization that I'm passionate about here that's working with kids with special needs in my county. So I'm working on a parent support group there. So I feel like in the 6 months I've been here, I feel like I've kind of thrown myself in, which has been really nice. But there isn't yet, I'm not to the point where I can call a friend for lunch or for coffee. Like I have many acquaintances and people that I really enjoy being around, but I don't have a friend base yet. So that's my goal as I go forward.
Bam! You've done a lot.
It is, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
my goal was to do it within my first year, and I've got a lot of things checked off my box already. So I'm making inroads with my ultimate goal of finding a friend base here.
Well, it sounds like you're well on your way because you started with activities. And I like that approach. You started with activities that you wanted to reacquaint with or begin, Pilates and yoga and hiking. I do yoga in my little workout room, watching my Peloton video coach, which is very different than actually going to a class.
Yes.
Because I don't make a friend there. I don't have anybody.
And it's nice because, every week it tends to be the exact same people in the exact same class that I go to. And so you start developing conversations and that. And so I see potential for that to lead into, let's get a cup of coffee, let's go for a hike.
And that is part of the really bad thing about, I'm going to use Peloton, which I love. It's one of the really bad things about a Peloton or the workout things that were a lifesaver in COVID, but you're doing group activities all by yourself and you feel like you're connected because the coach is pinging you, but you're not intersecting with other people.
That's what I need because that's what I left. I had a strong friend base in Los Angeles and walked away from that. And so recreating that, particularly when you don't have kids, so many of my closest friends are parents of my kids.
Yeah.
So you meet each other through school activities and sports activities and you become friends. And now I don't have that inroad anymore.
It's so true. I was thinking my wife and I tonight are going out to dinner with a couple in the neighborhood. And we've seen them, and we don't really have a lot of local friends that we hang out with because we have a lot of my wife's family. And we've seen them, and they have 2 dogs, and we've always talked while we're all walking dogs and everything else. And this is for like 2 years. We've never said, hey, you want to go out to dinner? Or, and they ended up asking us randomly. And now it's like, oh, we have a friend date.
Nice.
We're making a friend. So my question is, as you do this, how do you actually put yourself out there with one of these people to say you want to grab coffee? Is that a comfortable conversation for you?
Not at all. Not at all. It's comfortable for my husband. He could go to the grocery store and somebody's bagging his groceries, and the next thing you know, they're going out to dinner together. Like, he's really good about that. It's not in my comfort zone at all. So I'll have to see how I navigate that.
Okay. And I totally get that. And that's probably one of the ways that you complement each other, right?
Yes, absolutely. He has been very good about connecting with our neighbors, and he has gone fishing and golfing with a neighbor already. And so that's been the beginnings of some nice connections.
And you can make connections there, and they're all going to be related to who he's connected with, right? So if he finds someone that he enjoys doing stuff with, you may like the spouse, but they may not be a connection type of person necessarily, right?
True.
And that's
True.
hard to navigate.
Yes.
And I remember you mentioning that you're learning golf in order to do this with your husband, right?
Yes.
So that would be another intersection. How did you find the charity?
Just started looking online to see what was in my area related to children with special needs. And I reached out to 2 different organizations, and one said, thanks, but no thanks. And the other one said, how soon can you get here? And it's just beginning. I literally have worked 1 hour so far for them. And so it's just beginning. And I have my first parent support group, and it's basically a therapeutic play group. So it's basically parents bring their children who have special needs, and we do a developmental play group so that it's play, but it's play with a purpose, so that we're trying to promote developmental progression in these kids who have developmental delays. And as a byproduct, there's a parent support group inlaid within that.
And
So
this is all
that's
an
the
area that
plan.
you have a lot of wisdom in, no doubt, through your occupation.
Well, we'll see. This isn't an existing program. I'm in charge of starting it. So we'll see what happens.
Now, are you worried about getting overscheduled?
No, I'm actually not. I have found that I've got pretty good boundaries since coming here, because I retired and started working again, and then thought I retired again when I came in here, here and started working again. I've really established some good boundaries, and I'm not worried about getting overscheduled.
Okay. If you think of Joelle at age 85, try to bring your mind to your Joelle at 85. What would she tell you in terms of having really rocked retirement? What advice would she give you?
I think she would tell me not to be so constrained, to live a larger life, have a little more fun, take a little more risk, go for a little bit.
And what does go for it a little bit mean? Is that more activities or purpose? What does go for it mean?
I think it's related to the money piece. Like, don't be so careful and frugal all the time. And if there's something that you want, if it's in my means, go for it, get it, enjoy it. If there's an activity I want to do that there's a cost associated with it, take that chance, so that I'm not looking back going, wow, if only I had done this. That's one of my greatest fears in retirement, is that I'm going to be too constrained, live too small of a life because I'm being careful.
Yeah, that's a good balance. And having a framework to help you navigate that. Because if we don't have a framework to judge it, like you said, you're probably going to opt to, well, I probably shouldn't if I can't really see that it's okay.
Right. And that's really gets back to when we first speaking about, you asked me, why did you raise your hand? And that's really the crux of it for me, is I raised my hand because I want a set of eyes on it to say, you're okay, or you're not okay. I just want to know where I am in this continuum of living too constrained versus living too large? Where am I? What am I safe to do? And can I have a little bit more enjoyment rather than just screenshotting how much I have at the end of each day? It's
Every
ridiculous.
single day. I've heard that one before.
Every single day.
Yeah, you need to stop that. That's a good thing to stop.
I know I do. I know.
I like your word, by the way. I think it's a great word, expand. That's a really good word.
Thank you.
Because the natural ebb is to get smaller as we age. So that's a really good word. Now, your work brought you a lot of purpose, especially yours, because you worked with children.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of feel-good moments. I'm sure there's a lot of bureaucracy and all that other stuff, but I'm sure there's a lot of I am helping in some way, and you can see it directly. Is it important to replace that feeling of being useful, or are you in a place where I've done enough? I don't need to feel like I'm being useful to others.
No, it really is important to me. And I think that that's a really big piece about why I looked into a place I could volunteer, because I want to still have that sense of purpose. And I feel that I still have something to offer. I feel like I'm not completely done. So the volunteer work for me, well, it's, I guess, technically not volunteer work, but we're going to call it volunteer work. That's really important to me. And I see myself continuing to do that for hopefully several years.
Why is it important?
It is that sense of purpose. I like being able to put my head on the pillow at night and saying, I did something for someone else today. I like that. And I think that without it, I would feel, I don't know what the word is, I would feel less than. I just wouldn't feel whole. And so the sense of purpose is really big for me. And that's why being able to volunteer for an organization was really important to me. And I feel like I got on it pretty quick once I got here.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So I have one last question. And that is, you've done a yeoman's job. I think that's how you say it. You've done a great job of planning your routes, finding things to do, starting to create interactions. You said you're starting to talk with people and everything else. What is the next step you need to take in that process of establishing community?
Well, this will be challenging for me, but it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is it's not in my comfort zone to be that person that reaches out and says, hey, would you like to go for a hike? Or would you like to come over for dinner or get a cup of coffee? So I think that that's probably my next step if I'm going to take some of these acquaintance level relationships towards a potential friendship. I'm going to have to potentially be the person that makes the first step, because I'm the new person here. These people I know, they have friends. You know what I'm saying? They don't need a new friend. So I would have to take that step and reach out and see where that goes.
Yeah, that's a good step. And then as you get invited into their friendship circle, it's sort of like going into a party that's been going on for a long time. They have their own backstories and you're just sort of sliding in. So you're sort of left out of the inside jokes initially.
Yes.
Right? When are you going to take that step, by the way?
Ooh.
No pressure. You might not have identified somebody yet.
Yeah.
But if you had, when are you going to do it?
Within the next 4 months.
Okay.
End of first quarter.
Oh, all right. I like it now. That's not 4 months. That's like 2 months now.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing your journey. Tomorrow night, you and I are going to be live going through the feasibility part of it, publicly anyway. But I want to thank you for being so present and authentic.
Thank you. I
fun.
Appreciate that. It's been really very thought-provoking process. I just feel so fortunate that you gave me this opportunity, and I thank you for that.
I'm excited to see how you expand.
Me too.
Let's get to some of your questions about how to rock retirement. Now, if you have a question for the show, by the way, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger and type in your question, or you can even leave an audio question if you want some extra credit. We love that. Now, our first question comes from Greg, and he's worried about the Social Security system and it running out of money. Greg says, I read the news that the Social Security Trust will run out of money around 2034, give or take, assuming no changes are made to bring in more tax money. If this happens, there has to be a cut in benefits, he thinks. However, I have never had a financial advisor tell me that it is a concern or put it into their planning models. Many even suggest we burn through our savings in order to wait until age 70 to take our Social Security. And now government is even considering, Greg says, expanding Social Security benefits, which would likely put more pressure on the system. So Greg wants to know what my opinion is on the health of the Social Security system and how we should include this into our planning. It's a good question, Greg. And he says, I'm 65, newly retired, but not planning on taking Social Security until age 67. Great question, Greg. So let's approach this from a couple angles. First off, the reason I think financial planners suggest waiting on Social Security is that from a planning perspective, Social Security is a really, really valuable benefit. It is guaranteed income from the government, adjusted for inflation, that will last for as long as you live, even if it's 110. And if you happen to pass and your wife or your husband has a lower benefit than you, they'll get the higher benefit and it will last as long as they live, even to 110. That is a very valuable benefit when you're trying to pay for retirement. And rather than look at it, when is the break even that I come out ahead in an absolute dollar standpoint, in financial planning, we're trying to maximize that benefit for the longevity risk. Obviously, you get the cash flow and everything, but it's the longevity risk of what happens if I live to 80 or 90? What happens if I die and my wife lives to 90 or 100? Social Security is a big benefit from this perspective. So maximizing the amount of the payment and the fact that every year you delay, that payment goes up by a good percentage, and then that percentage is locked in, and then inflation adjusted beyond that is really powerful. So that's the perspective. Now, there are some counter arguments to that. And why do all financial advisors typically have this perspective? I'm not going to speak for everybody. My feeling is that when you're advising a client and helping them make decisions and being there for a period of time or all of time, managing the results of those decisions, the stakes are higher. So you take a lot more care of not just taking care of today's decision, but taking care of the impacts of that 20, 30 years down the road, regardless of whatever opinions are. And I think that's the reason we try to help maximize that benefit. Whereas if we're just talking theoretically about Social Security and pontificating in a blog post or in a video or whatever about the health of the system, it's a very low stakes thing. You're not there. You're not helping anybody make decisions, and you don't have to live with a lot of those decisions. So it's easy just to think out loud and be a little bit provocative at times. So I think that's one reason why there's a difference. Now, how do I approach Social Security planning? I do think of it as a very long-term, very valuable benefit. And when we create a plan of record, and I suggest this for you, when you create a plan of record, Greg, I suggest you do that with what the reality is at the moment. And the reality is this benefit is promised to you. We know what the taxation rules are and the claiming rules are. Create your plan of record assuming that it is this way, especially for you because you're age 65, because this is the reality on the ground. Now, once you have that plan of record, that's going to serve as your framework for making decisions of whether you take it at 67 or whether you take it at 70 or whether you take it today. Because maybe the plan of record, you look at it and say, hey, I'm 65, but I'm not in great health. I should probably take it earlier. Or because of your asset mix, I should probably take it earlier. You can factor that stuff in. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do what if scenarios to model the risk of the taxation of Social Security changing or the benefits being cut, and stress test your plan of record to say, well, what happens if my benefit cuts by 50%? What does that do to my plan to pay for this great life I have? You can model those, and then you can make a decision how much you want to try to mitigate that risk based on your assessment of the likelihood of it happening. But I wouldn't bake it into your plan, because it's not reality. It's a what if. You want your plan of record to be based on reality. Now, that's what I do. Let's talk about the health of Social Security system. And those reports come out every year as when it will run out of money. And I believe, if I recall, that's essentially when they're taking in less dollars than they're paying out. historically, we've seen a lot of adjustments to Social Security benefits. So far, all of these adjustments have been for future recipients only, not those already taking the Social Security payments. So there's also a lag window between the policy changes being passed and when they take effect. So it's typically not applied to the people that are currently getting their benefit. It's for the people that are coming up to get their benefit, generally based on age. And since you're so close to claiming age, this likely wouldn't have a huge impact on you. Now, what are some strategies that would shore up the Social Security system so it is viable longer term? One is they could increase the full retirement age, which they've done numerous times. I think that's one that makes sense. And if they were to do that, they likely wouldn't do it for somebody that's 60 or 55. They would likely do it for younger generations, so they had a longer plan time. So they could increase the full retirement age of when people get benefits. They could increase the payroll tax that's paid to fund Social Security. So every time you earn $1, you pay into the Social Security system and your employer pays into the Social Security system. So they could increase the percentage that you and the employer pay. That would help shore up the system. They could increase the income that you pay Social Security on. For example, in 2022, you and the employer pay into the Social Security system only on the first $140,000 worth of wages. After that, there's no Social Security tax being applied. So they could raise that ceiling. They could increase the taxation of Social Security, which is essentially a form of means testing. Right now, if you're receiving Social Security after full retirement age and you earn over a certain amount, a portion, up to 85% of your Social Security, can become taxable income rather than tax-free. Any one of these or some combination of these can have a significant impact on the viability of the system. And I think any one of these or a combination of these are likely to occur at some point. When is that point that they're going to do that? Most likely when the back is up against the wall and they have to do something, which is how the political system generally works. In your situation, Greg, I think I wouldn't worry too much about almost all of those because of where you're at in your vintage of your journey to rock retirement. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. Our next question comes from Pete. Pete says, first, thank you for the wealth of information and lighthearted explanation during your weekly show. You're welcome. I've been listening for about a year, and a couple weeks back, you mentioned that you are happy with your current client base and don't want to take on any more clients. So my question for you is, how does someone find a retirement planner like yourself? Is this a subject that you've covered? Separately, he says, I enjoy Colorado biking stories, and I rode the Monarch Crest Trail and 403 trails last year. It was awesome. Have you ever thought about doing Leadville? Just a thought. Oh, two big questions there, Pete. So the first one first, on finding a financial planner, someone to help you on this journey into retirement. Right now, I think if you go to my page, Tanya Nichols is someone I feel is a safe place. Andy Panko is a safe place, and their information is on my firm site, retireagile.com, because we're not accepting new clients. One thing I'm considering doing this year, because it's difficult to recommend another planner that follows the same philosophy and roughly the same spirit of an agile process. I'm considering creating a list of advisors that I have done due diligence on and feel are safe places to go, because I get this question a lot. I haven't done it yet. It's in the queue to consider and possibly do this year. Feel free to email me if you have a thought on that, because I'm not sure if I want to do it or not, but I feel bad that there is not a place to go to find a safe place, someone that fits who you are and where you're at, that you feel is a good fit. And that's always a frustration. I understand that. So let me know what you think about that. Second, on the Monarch Crest, awesome. My plan is to do it this year. In fact, I was working on 2002 planning because we're going back to Salida in August. And my goal this year is to do the Monarch Crest Trail, which is an epic mountain bike trail, above 10,000 feet, most of it. Luckily, mostly downhill. And I did it a couple of years ago, actually, with a client, and I felt like I survived it. So my goal this year is to do it, but enjoy it, not just survive it. Not that I didn't enjoy it. You get the point. Leadville, I have no interest in doing that race because that's a race. Leadville is a race, and the Leadville 100 miles up and down for 100 miles total. Yeah, I don't have an interest in walking that journey, Pete. I want to ride to enjoy and not put myself under a clock. So good idea, though. Our next question comes from Robbie, and he has a question on Roth conversions versus an earned income. Robbie says, I'm 65, retired with no earned income, just living on savings. I want to convert an IRA to a Roth to fill up my tax brackets because I have so low earned income. Can I if I have no earned income? So, Robbie, the answer is yes. You can do Roth conversions without having any income. You realize when you do the conversion, you're going to need to have the money to pay the taxes on the conversion because when you convert, say, $10 from an IRA to a Roth, that becomes taxable income. And if you have the money from an after-tax asset, that keeps more money in the Roth. Otherwise, you're going to have to take more money out just to cover the taxes. So you can definitely do that, Robbie. The next question comes from Chris. Chris says, enjoy the podcast, was wondering where to find a template for the plan of record that Roger references. Good question, Chris. Within the masterclass, within the Rock Retirement Club, we get to a household balance sheet and the first iteration of how we're going to fund the early parts of retirement, the first 5 years, exactly how we're going to pay for it and what the allocation is going to be. That essentially is how the template for the plan of record. This is what my current plan is for my household balance sheet. This is how I'm going to fund it over the next 5 years. And this is how I'm going to allocate every single dollar. Now, part of what we're going to work on in 2022 is putting that together in one document and fleshing it out a little bit. But right now, we don't have a template that's available outside of the club. So more work to be done on that. Our next question comes from Brad, who wants to know how to fund retirement before age 59 and a half. Brad says he loves the show and likes the format. Awesome. He says, my wife and I both turned 54 in 2022 and would like to semi-retire next year. Plan is to pay roughly half of our expenses from human capital or some kind of work. I'm trying to determine the best strategy to cover the other half from accumulated assets and still be eligible for Affordable Care Act credits. And he gives some financial information. He has IRA assets, he has Roth assets and brokerage assets or after-tax assets, etc. He and his wife are going to need about $60,000 a year to make up the difference. So first off, on the ACA credits, and it sounds like you're going to retire in 2023. I couldn't quite figure this out, but if that's the case, or if it's not the case, if it's 2022, realize that the cap to get ACA credits, or the subsidy cliff, they call it, there isn't one in 2022 because of the American Rescue Plan. So it's capped at 8.5% of your modified adjusted gross income. And if the Build Back Better Act gets passed, which is in Congress right now, they're trying to extend the suspension of the subsidy cliff out to 2025. So what that means is if you need $60,000 or you earned $60,000, your ACA premiums would be capped at 8.5% or about $5,100. So realize that that's there. So it sounds like you have a number of buckets to pull from. You have after-tax assets, you have IRA assets, and you have Roth assets. And I would plan out year by year your cash flow, your 5-year cash flow estimate from the date you retire, at least out 5 years, and then organize your assets and literally pick account by account where you're going to pull it from. You could pull it all from your after-tax assets and just drain your after-tax assets before you hit 59 and a half and then have the option to go to the IRAs, or you could use a combination of that and your Roth assets. Now, from the IRA or the pre-tax category, Brad, you have a couple options. You could do substantially equal payments. That's one way of accessing IRA assets early, and that's based off of a life table, and you have payments that you must take out over at least a 5-year period. And if you do that and you follow the 72T rules, then there is no penalty for the payment you take out prior to 59 and a half. That is a possibility. But once you do that, you can't change your mind. You got to do the whole 5 years if you execute a 72T. And so that can box you in a little bit. Another option is if you wait and separate employment from your employer after you turn 55 and the 401k allows it, then you can access your 401k assets without a 10% penalty prior to 59 and a half. But you have to remain in service at your company until after your 55th birthday. And then you also want to double check that the plan allows you to do this, because that can get a little quirky. So you want to go check the plan record if you're planning on doing something like that. So that's something to look into. But it sounds like you have the assets to do it. So one thing that you're going to have to model through, and it's hard to explain it just on a podcast, is you're going to want to build your 5-year estimate. You want to organize your assets by tax category, and then figure out by account where you're going to, and tax category, exactly where you're going to get that $60,000, and just create a first version of it. And then you can iterate and say, well, what if I do it this way and I don't worry about tax credits for this year? Or what if I do a 72T, and then you can compare them side by side. And that structure is what we do, I think, in module 9 of the masterclass in the Rock Retirement Club, which it says that you're planning on joining. And we're going to open that up at the end of this month, actually. So you can check that out too, Brad. Our last question comes from Charlemagne, who is newly non-health savings account beneficiaries. Hey, Roger, love the show. Recently on your show, you talked about health savings accounts. I am currently on the high deductible plan and max out my HSA with the goal to use it for healthcare costs in retirement. If my kids are the beneficiary, what happens if I pass away without needing to use it all? That's a really good question. And I think because of the early vintage of health savings account, not one that's been talked about a lot. So functionally, here's how beneficiaries of health savings accounts work. Number one is you can name beneficiary or beneficiaries of your health savings account. So if you're married and you name your spouse as beneficiary, that's the best option from a tax perspective, because then they will take over the health savings account and be able to withdraw from it tax-free for qualified healthcare expenses. In all other scenarios, whether it's your children or a friend or someone else, if you pass and they are named a beneficiary, what will happen is that the balance of the health savings account will be distributed to the beneficiaries, and the amount that they receive will be taxable income to them. In this case, your children, Charlemagne. And this could be problematic, especially if they're high income earners. Now, if you are in a lower income bracket and you name your estate as the beneficiary, then within your estate tax return, the health savings account is distributed to your estate and taxed as part of your estate. And this would include a revocable trust as well. So there might be some benefits to name yourself as beneficiary and have it part of your estate tax return rather than naming your children, assuming that that money ultimately goes to the children. One thing to think about there too is when you pass, if you had end-of-life expenses, medical expenses that are HSA eligible as a qualified medical expense, you can have the estate take money from the HSA out tax-free in order to reimburse for the cost of those compliant expenses. And that's something you want to make sure you think about. So hopefully that gives you some framework. So it's not very advantageous. You can't stretch these out to someone other than a spouse. And with that, let's go set a SMART sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. So in the next 7 days, as you prepare for retirement, I want you to start to think about your community, your connections, whether you've lived in the same place forever or you're considering moving somewhere new. What is your strategy to create that nest around you of amazing people that you can walk a little bit of life with? All right, next week, we start a month-long series on inflation and retirement, what it is, how much should we worry about it, and what are some of the strategies that you can take to help protect yourself against this big retirement risk. Talk to you next week. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize it's helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.